Episode 276, Teaching the Seniors. Luke's description was quite accurate. Before seeing her face, it was obvious she was quite cool.
What are you guys doing?
James asked as he came out after 20 minutes, holding a dish. He could only see Bessy and Tucker staring at the laptop and hear the sound of the keys being pressed. It seemed like they were gaming. Tucker replied without lifting his head.
Gaming.
Oh, James already expected it. He nodded and continued.
Quickly finish it. We're eating in 2 minutes.
The half-finished work wasn't that challenging for Bessy. It was similar to the source code released by the World Poker Tour. She was almost done with it already. She looked at Tucker and recalled something. She asked, "Should we make a copy?" Tucker immediately took out a thumb drive from the room. Michael took out 4 sets of utensils and started to arrange the table. By the time the dishes were ready, Bessy was done with the program. She shut off the laptop and ejected the thumb drive before asking Tucker to return it to James's workroom. James had prepared an entire table worth of dishes today. It had been a while since he was this happy after arriving in the capital. He and Michael poured 2 cups of alcohol and started chatting. As Bessy and Tucker didn't drink, Tucker brought her to see his computer games after they were done eating. This is from Michael's older sister. Bessy gave him the game console that Rosemary had prepared. Tucker opened the present. It was a game that suited his age. He toyed with the console for a while. Once he started playing seriously, he completed the game quickly. It was fun, but it was too easy. After he completed the game, he was no longer interested in it. Bessy had switched on his computer during this period. "How many have you completed?" asked Bessy, pointing to several icons. Tucker lowered his head in embarrassment and replied in a low voice,
"The first row."
Each row had 7 games. These were the upgraded versions of the enlightening games that Mr. Cheatham got for her last time. Bessy then spent an afternoon with Mr. Cheatham to upgrade them. She had given him the games half a month ago. He took an average of around 2 days to complete a game. He was just 9 years old, so his pace was within Bessy's estimation. Bessy then taught him some beginner guidelines, while Michael and James continued to drink for an hour before packing up. As she was present, James didn't dare to drink too much. They came out of the kitchen after packing the plates into the dishwasher. As James emerged from the kitchen, he saw that Michael was looking at the folder Uncle Jack gave him.
"Michael, do you understand these?"
James asked as he removed his apron. He felt stressed as he looked towards Michael before remembering that he was a doctor. James was traumatized by the education being forced onto him. Michael took a look at the document before answering,
"I know a little."
"Then help me with it, please." James's eyes lit up as he placed the bunch of data that Uncle Jack had given him onto the table. Uncle Jack wanted James to be independent as early as possible. He didn't expect him to contribute much, but he just wanted him to know enough to lead those under him. He was a bit too eager for results. This caused James to have an incomplete understanding of everything. Michael asked him for a pen and a piece of paper. He pushed the Miller family's business proposal aside and started to analyze them for James. The teachers that Uncle Jack got for James were the best in the industry. Their analysis was sharp and accurate, but James could never fully comprehend them. But when it came to Michael, James felt that the analysis was easier to understand. The two of them discussed it for 3 hours, from 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. James felt that he could understand a bit better now and praised Michael.
"Michael, you're so much better than the financial analysts. Aren't you a doctor? How did you know all this?" "My second major was economics when I was in university,"
Michael replied as he rolled up his sleeves.
"No wonder."
James nodded. He admired his capabilities even more. At 4:30, James went back to the kitchen, but Michael asked him to prepare less food. After thinking for a while, he painstakingly removed some dishes. He was really happy today and continued to ask Michael to drink more as the night went on. At the same time, Thanksgiving was also happening at the Clark family house. Half of the Clark family were gathered together. Joshua was sitting at the meeting table, and the younger generations toasted him one at a time. He was wearing an expensive purple suit, giving him a strict and formal aura. Aaron took a look at the people in the living room and asked with some unhappiness,
"Dad, is my brother not coming back?"
He knew that Michael was in the capital.
"He must have something to do.
Aaron, why are you so impatient?" Rosemary replied nonchalantly, holding a glass. The Clark family had a huge business. Joshua had 3 children, but there could only be one head of the family. Michael was uninterested in the position, so the other 2 were fighting for it. After hearing that, Aaron smiled. He took a look at Rosemary and nonchalantly replied,
I heard that you have withdrawn all the working capital of your company to win the bid for the World Poker Tour. You must be really confident.
World Poker Tour was one of the big 5 companies in America. A simple corporation from the capital couldn't compare to it. Ever since they entered the capital, they had implemented 3 large policies. Everyone was looking to establish some working relationships with them. So long as someone could establish this connection, no other corporation would dare to mess with them. After all, it would be suicidal to compete in financial terms with the Big 5.
You must be joking,
Rosemary replied coolly. After the meal, Aaron returned to his wing of the house. His subordinates were waiting for him. When they saw him approaching, they all stood up.
Aaron, we have sent someone to monitor the situation at the base. As of right now, 2 are waiting to transfer back here. We can consider roping them in.
One of them said while holding a name list, bowing. Aaron took a seat. As he picked up a cup of tea, he replied,
Which 2? Instructor Clark. He belongs to Joshua. He hasn't announced his allegiance otherwise. Also, Captain Baldwin. His background seems all right, and Rosemary didn't send anyone to contact him yet.
His subordinate replied. Aaron nodded lightly and asked,
Has Rosemary done anything recently? Other than going to the World Poker Tour, she has been visiting Michael. Also, she has gotten a computer for Miss Miller, paying a great price for it.
The subordinate replied,
Is it possible for the young lady to successfully bid for the World Poker Tour? Regarding Miss Miller, should we...
Aaron frowned. He thought for a moment before saying,
No need for that. Put more effort into Instructor Clark.
One day after Thanksgiving, those that were supposed to work were going to work. At the Park Place Apartments, James was working too. After Michael's assistance, James could understand things a lot better. He was almost done with the proposals that Uncle Jack gave him. In the process of understanding the proposals, he would sometimes seek more help from Michael. The content that was meant for 2 days of work was completed within a day. He had some spare time now. James started to look at the thumb drive that Uncle Jack gave him. Uncle Jack had given him something of a similar nature before, so James thought that it would be similar to the introductory programs that he had dealt with before. However, when he opened the program, it was filled with a bunch of mathematical symbols that he couldn't understand. He spent an entire morning trying to understand it, to no avail. In the afternoon, Uncle Jack and the middle-aged man arrived as promised. James opened the door for them.
You're done with the documents?
Uncle Jack was shocked to see that the computer and thumb drive were on the table. James nodded and carefully answered,
Yes, Uncle Jack.
Uncle Jack was surprised. He took the 2 proposals that James had handed him and started reading them. Then, his expression turned serious. When Uncle Jack finished reading the proposals, he walked around James in confusion. He then asked him a series of questions, which James answered adequately.
After a period of absence, you may have changed for the better.
A smile appeared on Uncle Jack's face. It was the first time this happened.
James, you have improved tremendously.
It was as though he was enlightened. James quickly waved his hands and embarrassedly replied,
Michael taught me all this. Michael?
Uncle Jack asked after hearing a foreign name.
He's a doctor, but when he was in university, he studied economics.
James smilingly replied. Uncle Jack nodded. He was interested in Michael. He could tell that he had a sharp business sense. It would be a pity if he remained as a doctor.
The next time you meet him, you can invite him to work for the Miller family.
I'll ask, James replied. As he nodded, he took a mental note to send Michael a message after Uncle Jack left. Tucker heard this as he came out for water and looked at James.
But I couldn't do the program.
James didn't notice the look Tucker was giving him.
I cannot understand it at all. It's all right,
Uncle Jack replied as he picked up the thumb drive on the table.
It was the wrong thumb drive. It's a big project from the company, and it's just a half-completed product. Our development team is still in the works to finish it. I have to bring it to the Miller family headquarters later.
As he spoke, Uncle Jack started frowning. The old man's programmers had all defected to the Flake family, so there was no one left that they could use. He couldn't settle the complex programming engine and just wanted to make things difficult for Uncle Jack. Episode 277, This Year's Queen. Hence, Uncle Jack didn't panic when he left the thumb drive here. There was nothing they could do even if he brought it back. They would have to continue giving up shares in the company, and soon there would be a tough battle to fight. James went beyond Uncle Jack's expectations these days and no longer hemmed and hawed while answering his questions. Without staying long, Uncle Jack took his USB and left. A black car was waiting for him downstairs. He got into it with the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man turned the car key, his expression a little strange.
What's the problem?
Uncle Jack was in a good mood today and his expression was extremely relaxed. Driving out onto the main road, the middle-aged man glanced at the rearview mirror.
Did you notice the gifts placed in James's house? No, I didn't.
Uncle Jack held the USB and shook his head.
The packaging was exquisite, and the gifts were from a big brand that is yet to be released to the world. It has only been specially prepared for the internal members.
The middle-aged man sounded surprised at this. James and Tucker's previous living environment wasn't considered good, and they couldn't afford such things. Furthermore, James didn't look like he had friends of this level. It was extremely puzzling. Putting away the USB, Jack, the Miller family's butler, didn't read too much into it and just stared out the window thoughtfully.
I was thinking about who the Michael is that James talked about. I've never heard of him, despite being in Evanston for so long.
It was still morning, and when they reached the Miller family's headquarters, it wasn't past 8 yet. The Miller family nowadays had fallen short of their past glory, and their headquarters building wasn't so nice anymore. Very few people came and went. Jack stared at the building for a while before entering. Along the way, many people stopped and greeted him. Jack walked all the way to the meeting room, where 3 men in their 40s were already inside. They looked a little depressed and smelled of alcohol. When they saw him entering, they immediately stood up. These were the few programmers who had received the old man's favoritism and had neither left after the Miller family's downfall nor been roped in by the other son of the Miller family who had allied himself with the Flake family.
Where are Mr. Miller and the others?
Jack greeted them and glanced around, but didn't see anyone else. All 3 of them stood up and shook their heads. Jack glanced at the time on his wristwatch and frowned. At 8:10 a.m., the time for the morning meeting had already passed. After waiting for a few minutes, a woman with meticulously styled hair and high heels pushed the door open. She entered with a document in her hand, full of vigor.
Mr. Miller went to join the World Poker Tour's bid at 9:30 a.m. today. He's just set off and didn't have the chance to inform you. He sends his apologies for making you wait.
The middle-aged man behind Jack looked angry, but the smile on Jack's face remained unchanged, and he turned slightly sideways to the middle-aged man.
Keith,
he said. Hearing his name like this, the middle-aged man swallowed his words.
Secretary Rhodes, I wonder when Mr. Miller will come back.
Jack's voice was undulated, without any obvious emotional changes. Secretary Rhodes thoughtfully glanced at him.
Around 11 o'clock.
Jack slightly nodded, still smiling as if he wasn't angry.
Okay then, we'll wait here for him to come back.
At the same time at the Highline Apartments, Bessy was still in the middle of her break. At this time, Rosemary was waiting for her downstairs. She wanted to take her to see Evanston's scenery. Bessy had rejected her invitation on Thanksgiving, so she had come today after Bessy had agreed to go. Michael had just picked up the car keys, wanting to drive them out. However, Patrick came upstairs and said,
Michael, Harry has news.
Standing on the spot, Michael rested his hands on the table and stared at Patrick. His eyelids drooped, and he seemed completely convinced.
How timely.
Folding her arms, Rosemary lifted her chin towards him and smiled happily.
Bro, looks like we can only ask Secretary Peterson to drive us there.
Michael threw the keys to Rosemary accurately, and she caught them in the palm of her hands. Unaware of what had just happened, Patrick waited for Michael to go upstairs. Once Bessy and Rosemary had left, he turned to look at Marvin.
What happened?
Marvin glanced at him sympathetically.
Michael wanted to drive Miss Miller out.
Patrick didn't know what to say. Looking down at the file in his hands, he scolded Terry in his heart before heading upstairs. In the study, Michael turned around, sitting on the chair with a black brush spinning between his fingers. He glanced at Patrick, his gaze distant.
Is there a problem at the border?
Terry went up to him with the file.
Giant Crocodile has a very powerful hacker, and Alexander can't deal with the person. He even went to Miss Miller for help, but he ultimately still couldn't find out the details. The good news is that the hacker on Giant Crocodile's side didn't retaliate, so the business that they discussed turned out to be successful.
Their discussion certainly wasn't the normal kind. At the mention of a hacker, Michael stopped spinning the pen and looked up.
No retaliation?
Patrick glanced at his expression. After following him for so long, he was naturally capable of guessing his thoughts.
You have an inkling? What's the possibility of Giant Crocodile having Lone Wolf on his side?
Michael casually threw the pen onto the table. Patrick was taken aback.
Him?
Michael picked up the file and flipped through it at will, his tone indifferent but convinced.
I'd guess 100%.
Other than someone from 129, Alexander couldn't think of anyone else with the ability to suppress Alexander and Bessy like that.
129 rarely intervenes in other forces' affairs.
Patrick frowned worriedly.
Did something happen on Terry's side?
Lone Wolf had only come out of reclusion in the last year, but he still took very little orders. He'd only worked on 8 orders so far.
If it's true, then Terry can't match up.
Michael looked up. Patrick was really taken aback at this moment. He always knew that 129 was unfathomable, but he was unaware of the extent of their powers since he had no business with them. He didn't care about Sherry boasting wildly in Evanston either. But after receiving Michael's conviction about 129's strength, he developed a deeper fear towards them.
No wonder the few families suddenly showed kindness to the Flake family.
Downstairs, Secretary Peterson arrived from the company.
We're going to the bidding site first at the World Poker Tour.
Rosemary and Bessy sat in the back seat. Rosemary placed her hands on her lap and sat with her back straight.
But I'm just going there to watch the show. This time it's not our turn.
After that, we'll go to the ancient city 1 kilometer away from the World Poker Tour, where Michael, Samuel, and the others used to play when we were young. Resting her hand on the window, Bessy didn't sit in such an exemplary posture as Rosemary. She brushed away the hair that had fallen over her eyebrows and said, "Not necessarily."
Huh?
Rosemary responded to her words and guessed she was implying that their visit to the World Poker Tour wasn't just to go through mere formalities.
The World Poker Tour's affairs are a little complicated. Many interests are involved inside, which you might not be clear about. Forget it. Let's not talk about this. I'll tell you about my brother.
Bessy touched her nose and remained silent. Rosemary only stopped talking when they reached the bidding site. Calming her expression, she stepped out of the car in her high heels, her chin slightly raised and her eyebrows sharp. She looked like a strong woman again. Casually following behind her, Bessy held her phone in one hand and put on her cap with the other. Rosemary stopped and waited for her to catch up. They then continued walking slowly into the World Poker Tour's building. As she was well known in Evanston, people greeted her every few steps along the way, but she only nodded coldly to them. Names were pasted on the bidding field's seats. Rosemary sat in the first row, while Bessy sat in Secretary Peterson's seat. Rosemary sat down in an exemplary posture with her legs crossed. She placed a hand at her mouth and whispered to Bessy,
"Did you see him? He's the 4th son of the Miller family. The Miller family was originally the head of the 4th Research Institute. You'll know what that is next time. Although the Miller family has already fallen, this son had already allied with the Flake family. Both of them are in the IT industry. Since they're here, I'm only an escort."
Bessy was originally nonchalant, but at the mention of the Miller family, she turned to look at the 4th son. The Miller family's 4th son was also sitting in the first row, 5 seats away from Rosemary. He was about 40 to 50 years old, and aside from some wrinkles on his face, his mental state didn't seem old as he sat there in his silver gray suit. When he saw Rosemary, he hurriedly came over to greet her.
"Miss Clark."
Even if the Miller family hadn't declined and was still in its heyday, it was still incomparable to the Clark family, the head of the 4 big families. Thus, he would still have to speak to Rosemary. Because of Bessy, Rosemary also had good feelings towards people with the last name Miller. She nodded slightly to the 4th son, her attitude much better than before. The 4th son returned to his seat, feeling strange.
I guess she already knows that you'll soon become one of the developers of the World Poker Tour's new technology.
The shareholder sitting next to him whispered. Many people had congratulated him in advance on buying into the company. The Miller family's fourth son sounded humble and cautious.
The World Poker Tour hasn't come to a conclusion yet. It's all still speculation.
Not far away, Bessy was slowly taking out her earphones from her pocket when she heard something and glanced over. She crossed her legs and casually scoffed. Episode 278, Northwestern University's school heartthrob, Luke Song. What's wrong? Rosemary was very concerned about her. Putting the earphones in her ear, Bessy turned on the music and leaned against the chair. I heard a joke, she replied. At 9:30 a.m., the manager of the World Poker Tour, who was in charge of the bidding, came out with a contract. Bessy had placed her peaked cap on one of the chairs when she sat down. Now, she put it on again blankly. She lightly tapped on the armrest with her bony and dazzlingly white fingers. Rosemary glanced at her. She had heard from Marvin that Bessy's temper wasn't very good and that she hated noise. But in the past 2 months, Rosemary hadn't seen how bad her temper was. Seeing her behavior, she lowered her voice and comforted her. We'll leave in a while. Look at their company's 4-dimensional projection. It's very realistic. You can't see it anywhere else. She felt like Bessy might have stayed too long and was a little impatient. She had brought her here with intentions of showing her the 4-dimensional projection. Rosemary had been very amazed the first time she saw it. Bessy whispered back, "Thank you." Glancing up, Darren was going through the slides. Seemingly feeling her gaze on him, his fingers stiffened and shook very obviously when he reached out to slide onto the next screen.
Darren Schuler.
He finally finished introducing himself, not daring to look into the first row again. Reaching out, he swiped in the air again, sliding past news articles, finally stopping on the product page. With a straight face, he officially introduced the product rigorously and meticulously, as if he was reporting to a leader. After a brief introduction, he opened the document and slightly sighed in relief.
After the headquarters consideration, the candidate for this additional investment is...
In his seat, the Miller family's fourth son arranged his clothes calmly, trying to suppress the corners of his mouth from arching. However, the joy in his eyes was still obvious. Rosemary had already taken her bag and was about to leave.
Chairman Rosemary Clark,
Darren announced and looked in her direction, slightly relieved. The smile on the fourth son's face wavered.
Congratulations, Chairman Clark.
The other investors on the field all reacted. Although the fourth son had outbid them, it wasn't difficult to understand that the World Poker Tour would choose Rosemary. After all, Rosemary was part of the Clark family. Stunned for only 3 seconds, Rosemary quickly arranged her expression and stood up, maintaining the aura of a prestigious lady. She raised her hand and officially thanked the people. After Darren greeted the other investors, he walked over, polite and cautious.
Chairman Clark, please come over here. We need to re-sign the contract.
Rosemary shook hands with Darren, then glanced at Bessy. Bessy, you can go back to the car first. I'll come out in 10 minutes. She understood that the World Poker Tour strictly controlled entrance rights. Darren smiled and gently said,
Chairman Clark, the World Poker Tour is open to everyone today. This young lady can come in with you.
Really? Rosemary was stunned. She'd had to check in to enter the previous time, so why did the rules change today? But she didn't read into it and just followed Darren to the elevator. He swiped his card and entered the 28th floor. Glancing at the 28th floor, Rosemary's eyes narrowed. Most people had entered the 2nd floor last time. The 28th floor was very quiet. Darren directly took out the contract without beating around the bush. Rosemary looked through it and signed it after ensuring that the conditions were no different from the previous one. The whole process took only 10 minutes.
It's almost lunchtime.
Getting up, Darren happily shook hands with Rosemary and issued a gentlemanly invite.
Chairman Clark, may I have the honor of dining with you?
Rosemary wouldn't usually reject such a rare opportunity. My apologies, Director Schuler, but I have plans to take the child to see Evanston scenery. Rosemary retracted her hand as she apologized. I'll invite you next time when given a chance. Director Schuler immediately replied,
Not to worry, your business is important.
He walked Rosemary down to the car. Rosemary calmly bid him farewell, but she felt rather surprised inside. Darren today seemed overly enthusiastic. Not far from the World Poker Tour's gates, when Rosemary's car drove away, Darren wiped the fine sweat on his forehead. "Director?" asked the assistant beside him. "Are you okay?"
I'm okay.
Darren shook his head, sighing in relief. She had dared address Miss Miller as a child. Darren felt like she must be even more important than he thought. In the car, flipping through the contract, Rosemary looked up with bright eyes. "I can't believe Director Schuler didn't choose the Miller family." Secretary Peterson also felt puzzled.
Chairman Clark, have we won the lottery?
The Miller family's fourth son and the Flake family have allied. It'll be advantageous to them no matter whose side I take. Rosemary closed the contract. Crossing her legs and playing with a game on her phone, Bessy slightly tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. Rosemary remembered that Bessy was a college student and probably didn't like to listen to these kinds of talks. Thinking about how she probably didn't understand it, she stopped talking and immediately changed the subject. She asked if her brother liked game consoles. Bessy touched her forehead. "Yeah, very much so, but the games are a little too simple. He cleared one round in 10 minutes. Really? Rosemary guessed that just like Bessy, Tucker also liked playing games. She decided to find a more difficult game for him the next time. At the Miller family's headquarters, the fourth son had just returned. His expression was dark and his brows were slightly furrowed. Secretary Rhodes walked over in her high heels and quickly followed him. "Chairman Miller, Jack and the others are still waiting for you in the conference room." Halting, the fourth son took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth.
They haven't left yet?
They were surely patient. "They have waited for 3 hours ever since 8 o'clock, Secretary Rhodes reported.
Okay, tell the people in the technical department to prepare. We'll meet with Jack. This time, he'll have to give up more shares.
The Miller family's fourth son turned around and walked towards the conference room with the cigarette in his hand. Inside, sitting on the head position, Jack had his eyes closed, looking calm and without the slightest hint of impatience. Keith Marino stood beside him. Boom! The conference room's door flew open, and the fourth son entered with several people. He sat in the middle position and looked at Jack.
"Sorry to keep you waiting."
Although his words relayed his penitence, his tone didn't sound at all apologetic. People from the technical department also came in with USB flash drives and documents.
"Let's begin."
He glanced at Jack first.
"You have the highest seniority here. Do you want to go first?"
Standing behind Jack, Keith Marino pursed his lips and bitterly pinched his fingers. The fourth son had monopolized the Miller family's studios and had even poached several capable employees from Jack. Wasn't he just asking the obvious at this point? But Jack remained calm and smiled without the slightest hint of anger.
"Sir, you can go first."
The fourth son already expected this. He was the one who knew best whether Jack could produce the content. Glancing at him calmly, he asked the technical department's deputy to explain the situation. The technical department's deputy took the USB and the files and simulated the entire engine on stage. This was a public fragment of the World Poker Tour's artificial intelligence published on the internet by an insider. All the IT companies were secretly studying this while pretending otherwise on the surface. The Miller family was of no exception. However, the code was too obscure, and few companies could decipher it in such a short time. The fourth son's side had only progressed to 80%, but it was still better off than Jack's semi-finished products. After the technician finished speaking, the fourth son knocked on the table and glanced at Jack.
"It's your turn."
After a moment of silence, Jack squeezed the USB in his hand and glanced at the 3 old programmers sitting in the same row. The others didn't speak, but the one in the middle, slightly reeking of alcohol, reached out.
"I'll go,"
he said. He took the USB handed over by Jack, then walked over to the slides and inserted the USB into the computer. Without looking at him, the fourth son sipped his tea with his eyes lowered, covering the cold sneer at the corners of his mouth. He knew Jack's team was dead in the water. The Miller family's fourth son put down the teacup with a fake smile.
"Jack, if you can't take this project, your share for this year as the butler will be 30% as usual."
After forming an alliance with the Flake family and having Sherry on his side, he already knew that Jack had brought James and his son back secretly. He also knew where Jack was training James. But if Jack was believed that he could suppress him by cultivating a random relative, he was gravely mistaken. Jack remained motionless, but the middle-aged man standing behind him couldn't conceal his anger.
Keith.
Jack tilted his head and glanced warningly at him. Then he turned to Ricky Marino, who was standing in front of the computer.
Continue.
Ricky had drunk all night and still had a headache from the hangover. After inserting the USB, he turned on the projector and opened the folder inside. Jack had shown them this semi-finished product. With only 3 people left, even with the help of the computer, it was impossible to run such a large simulation system engine. After a period of time, they had just given up studying it. These people had fought alongside the head of the family before, but who knew that the whole Miller family would suffer defeat because of them? Ricky looked through the folders and thought, "Why are there so many documents?" Although slightly surprised, he didn't read too much into it and just clicked on the top folder. The folder opened and revealed a leaf-shaped main engine. His mind, that had moments before been fuzzy from the hangover, suddenly cleared, and his eyes widened. Having studied the code for a while, he knew that the main engine hadn't even been formed when he last looked at it. And where did that icon come from? He immediately clicked on the icon. Without any intention of presenting real findings, Jack hadn't prepared what he would say, typed out any documents, or designed plans to distribute to the people in the meeting. Episode 279, Top Girl on Campus. Luke looked up.
It's her.
Jerome's eyes lit up, and when Bessy walked over, he pushed one of the cups of coffee in front of her.
My friend, sit down.
Luke glanced sideways at him. Touching his nose, Jerome realized he shouldn't dare to call her his friend like that. Thanks, she said, pulling the chair out and sitting down. Bessy took off her cap and then put it aside. Today, she was in a casual plaid shirt and black jeans. Her hair was casually scattered behind her, giving her a sultry and fresh aura that also made it feel like there was a cool breeze around her. Looking at Luke, it made sense that his friends would be good-looking as well. And indeed, Scarlett was good-looking, but Jerome hadn't expected Luke's other friend to look like this. He definitely hadn't expected to recognize her. Several major posts on the forum had already been updated. With the release of the military training group's photo, Bessy had successfully made it to Northwestern University's popular girls list. Coupled with her reputation as the queen, she soared to the top in less than a day. In the past, there would be countless voices of doubt about the most popular girls list. No matter who topped the list, voices of disagreement always popped up. But there was almost no objection this time. Unbeatable looks, intelligence, and excelling even in combat. Who would dare rebut against such a top choice? Although Jerome had already entered the laboratory, it didn't mean he no longer cared about Northwestern University's major events. The school forum's photos usually disappeared after only one day, but he had already seen it. His roommates had shared the Queen's face with him. Such distinctive looks and unique temperament could never be forgotten after one glance. Luke always said he had 2 girlfriends, but he had never mentioned that one of them was Bessy. Jerome's mind buzzed as if countless fireworks were booming inside it at the same time. They exploded and sparks burst. One was last year's top scorer, while the other was this year's. Luke was talking to him, but received no response. Thus, he casually said to Bessy,
He's Jerome, a senior.
Bessy and Scarlett both politely greeted him. Holding his coffee cup, Luke glanced at Jerome again and introduced him to the girls.
Scarlett, a student in the Politics and Law Department. Bessy, a student in the Science and Technology Department.
After a long while, Jerome finally returned to his senses and faintly glanced at him. Luke ignored him and turned to Scarlett.
You didn't take a second major?
Sipping the coffee with her eyebrows lowered, Scarlett replied, We have a lot to learn in any major. I don't have any spare time. Luke's second major was photography, but Scarlett was different from him and Bessy. She had been wild since she was young and had always had bad grades. Everything she had now was the fruits of her hard labor during high school. She could only concentrate on one thing at a time, otherwise she would perform badly. Luke tapped the cup with his fingertips and slightly nodded.
There's a photography association in the school. Stop delaying time. Northwestern University's exams are strict, so if you don't meet the standards in the mid and final exams, you'll fail out. Come to me if you encounter any problems.
Hearing this, Jerome finally understood why Luke had asked him for a set of books on politics and law. She wasn't specifically going to take a second major. Finding his own voice, Jerome turned to Bessy.
Bessy, your movements in Northwestern University this year are even bigger than Luke's last year. How is it going for you? When do you intend to come to our laboratory?
The laboratory would probably explode if such a beautiful girl came in. Jerome kind of wanted to see what it would be like then. I don't know. I haven't finished reading the book yet. Bessy leaned slightly on the table and squinted as she looked out the window. She looked away when she heard Jerome's voice. I'll see how it goes.
You're from the computer science department, right? Me too.
Jerome still remembered the school forum's introduction. He patted his chest and said,
Come to me if you encounter any problems in the future.
Luke turned around and coldly said,
Her second major is nuclear engineering.
Jerome was speechless. He thought he should just forget it. Were geniuses all so arrogant now? A second major in the nuclear engineering department, along with a first major in the computer science department. She had just started school and already had applied for a second major? What about the first major? The most unbelievable thing was that the dean of the physics department and the assistant teachers had agreed. 4 days later, Kara and Alyssa finally got the World Poker Tour's express mail. Both of them unpacked the couriers in the bedroom. Their computers weren't white. Kara had asked for a silver one, and Alyssa wanted a black one. After getting the computer, Kara immediately downloaded the poker tournament. It loaded countless times faster than she had imagined. This kind of speed wasn't felt by Alyssa, who didn't usually play games nor surfed the internet. But she downloaded a physical structure map and saw that all the functional simulations in it were available. It was probably countless times better than the other computers on the market. I can't even find the same computer online. Alyssa had searched the internet on her phone and still failed to find the computer's original price. While holding a glass of water, Denora stood behind them, staring at the running computer with complicated thoughts. Of course not. This is the World Poker Tour's conceptual computer. It's only available internally and is still in development. Other than the World Poker Tour's partners, only some people with powerful connections in Evanston could obtain a trial computer during the research and development period. Not only must they be powerful, but they also needed connections. Denora knew that Sherry had one, which was someone's gift. Numerous people in Evanston were trying to curry favor with her, let alone a computer. 2 computers weren't a problem for her. But Denora really didn't know where Bessy got hers from. At this moment, she immediately remembered the person Bessy mentioned who had graduated earlier. Where's Bessy? Denora turned around and couldn't find her. The computer and backpack on her desk were also gone. After playing a game, Kara turned off the computer and took out her book. She went home at noon. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. The school hadn't given a holiday after the previous military training. Thus, they were given 2 more days off during the Thanksgiving break. Bessy had returned straight away. Neither Kara nor Alyssa were locals. Their homes were very far away from Evanston, and it was too troublesome to travel there and back. Hence, they didn't intend on returning home. She went back? Denora was taken aback. Don't you have lessons later? Bessy has 2 majors. She's now majoring in nuclear engineering. She'll only come for 1 major exam during the midterm and final exams. Kara explained. In the past 2 days, Bessy hadn't attended classes with them, so Kara had asked her very seriously and had been very impressed by her answer. She's studying 2 majors in her first year? Denora's IQ wasn't low. The Sims family was doing just as well as the Flake family, and she was favored among them due to her intelligence as well. Hearing this, she narrowed her eyes. Northwestern University isn't high school. The level of content is much higher. She wasn't affectionate towards Bessy. From the beginning, she had felt an inexplicable sense of competitiveness towards her. And only now did she realize the gap between them. She had barely returned to the dormitory these past few days, let alone communicated with her. Hearing Kara's words, Denora shook her head. If Bessy was studying her second major, the midterm and final exams would surely be a breeze. But she was taking a second major and was still coming back for her first major's exams. Northwestern University's papers were extremely difficult every year. The teachers never gave the key points, so it wasn't something they could breeze by. Even Denora, who was now majoring in computer science, sometimes dozed off after listening to the doctoral lectures and couldn't catch up afterward. This wasn't something that could easily be understood by reading books. Not to mention, skipping all the classes? She felt like Bessy was being too overconfident. I don't know. Worried, Kara couldn't sit still after hearing Denora's words. She quickly opened her phone and asked Bessy about taking the exams for her majors. Bessy replied very quickly. Kara was taken aback by the answer. Our dean asked her to take the computer science exam. If she fails, she can no longer study nuclear engineering. Denora sneered. I knew it. She would only last for half a semester. After that, she would have to transfer back. Bessy had already left the school. She walked for 10 minutes before leaving Northwestern University's big campus. Glancing around at the gate, she immediately saw Michael standing across the road. Since the Highline apartments were so close, he hadn't driven. He stood directly at the school entrance. Wearing a neat necktie and shirt, he seemed to be talking to someone on the phone, his brows looking lazy. Several students didn't have classes on this Friday afternoon, and it was even the holidays. Many tourist groups had come to Northwestern University's campus and were flooding the gates, but Bessy still saw him at a glance. Michael also noticed her. He paused and beckoned to her. Episode 280. Zeke Miller.
He's James's youngest son. He's in elementary school,
Jack explained. As a programmer, Ricky didn't know much about the Miller family's grievances, but he had also heard of the previous generation's death and disappearance. Now, only the fourth son and Zeke remained in the direct line of descent. James had just been retrieved by Jack. After hearing Jack's explanation, Ricky knew who Tucker was, but his intuition told him that he wouldn't find anything even if Tucker came back. Jack sat on the stool, waiting for Tucker's return. The phone in his pocket rang a few times, and when he looked at it, his eyes lit up. He immediately stood up and picked up the call.
Sir, you're back?
The youngest son of the head of the Miller family, Zeke Miller, was 32 years old this year. He was a film god, a household name in the entertainment industry, a rare talent who had both looks and strength. Zeke had been making a major project abroad. During this period, the communication wasn't good, and he rarely contacted Jack. On the other end of the call, Zeke was dressed in casual clothes. He wore a pair of sunglasses on the bridge of his nose and a black mask over his mouth.
I just got off the plane. I heard that an older relative was found.
Your movie is wrapping up. I haven't contacted you all this while, so I didn't notify you, Jack explained.
After exchanging a few more words, Jack hung up the phone and stood up.
James, Zeke is back. I'll take you to meet him first.
He couldn't wait for Tucker's return. Jack drove the car directly to the school and brought Tucker along to meet Zeke. On the other side of town, Bessy and Rosemary had strolled for the afternoon and were now eating in a retro restaurant. This place runs on a membership system. I heard that their family comes from someone who was the president's chef. Rosemary handed the menu to her. Order whatever you like. The interior was of an old 1950s diner and was surrounded by decor from that time period as well. It only served 30 tables of guests every day and was extremely quiet. Those who knew this place were families of rich heritage and history in Evanston. They sat on the second floor, facing the window, which had a view of the old building far away past the city wall. Bessy casually ordered 2 dishes and returned the menu to Rosemary, who added a few more signature dishes. On the top floor of the restaurant, Aaron was looking at the menu when his subordinate came up and whispered to him.
My sister is here?
He narrowed his eyes.
Who is she with?
As a luxury restaurant, people who weren't particularly important were generally not brought here.
I think that it's Miss Miller.
The subordinate paused and sounded a little puzzled.
Those two seemed to have strolled around the tourist part of the city the whole day. Strolled for a whole day?
Aaron put down his wine glass and frowned upon hearing this.
What the hell is going on with Rosemary these days?
Why was she always entangled with Michael and that Miss Miller? And they even strolled around the city? The company's funds were almost out of operation. It was as if she had been possessed.
Let's go. We'll meet my sister downstairs.
Feeling strange that the person they were waiting for hadn't arrived yet, Aaron put down the menu and stood up to find Rosemary. The subordinates immediately went outside, and as soon as they opened the door, a woman wearing a purple outfit entered. "Mr. Clark, my apologies for the long wait," the woman said apologetically to him. "I happened to receive an order." Smiling, Aaron turned and walked back.
I haven't waited that long. Ma'am, you're already doing me a favor by taking time out of your busy schedule.
This woman was Sherry. Aaron had wanted to go downstairs to take a look at that Miss Miller before Sherry's arrival, but now that she was here, he naturally didn't entertain such an idea. Pitted against each other, it was obvious who was more important. Downstairs, Bessy and Rosemary had just finished their meal. When the dessert came up, Rosemary didn't continue eating and instead packed it for Bessy to bring back. "The desserts here are delicious and aren't for sale anywhere else," Rosemary said as she went downstairs. It'd be a pity not to eat it. When they got downstairs, Marvin's car was already parked there. Bessy immediately recognized it. She bid Rosemary farewell and got into the car. Standing behind Rosemary, Secretary Peterson wondered,
"Miss, why were you eating in such a hurry?"
It wasn't weird to eat for 2 hours in this kind of restaurant, but how long had they taken? Just over half an hour. Rosemary folded her arms and sneered. "If we didn't get her home on time, we wouldn't have received any money next month." If Michael said so, they would really suddenly go broke. Even Aaron knew of Rosemary's company's recent deficit. Secretary Peterson was speechless. Since the plagiarism incident, Anne hadn't come to the Violin Association for more than half a month. She was afraid of being looked at with contempt. And Mr. Anderson hadn't contacted her either. For more than half a month, Anne didn't dare to go to the Press family's house and only stayed in an apartment that the Smith family had bought for her. It wasn't until Thanksgiving break ended and the internet fury about the plagiarism faded that she dared to come to the Violin Association, wearing a mask. At around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, most of the students of the Violin Association had already left. Anne lowered her head and hid her face all the way to the teaching building. As she went to the elevator on the first floor, only a few people occasionally passed her. Wearing a hood and covering her face with her hair, almost nobody recognized her. She walked to the door of the elevator. The elevator door opened. She went in. And when it closed again, she heaved a sigh of relief. Then she took out her student card and swiped it inside. The elevator remained motionless. Anne was shocked. Glancing down at her student card, she swiped it again in disbelief. The second floor still didn't light up. As she thought of the only possible explanation, the card in her hand fell to the ground with a plop. She squatted down to pick it up again, then got out of the elevator. Entering classroom 101, she took out her cell phone and logged on to the Violin Association's official website. She was usually able to log into the Violin Association's official website by using the association's network. After entering her name and password, she then clicked to log in. A line of words popped up on the screen soon after. "This account name does not exist." It doesn't exist? How could it be? Anne almost lost her mind. She thought that after this incident passed, she would be able to make a comeback. But how could the Violin Association suddenly remove her? Without the Violin Association, without Mr. Anderson, she couldn't imagine what she was left with next, and she couldn't imagine how the Perez family and Smith families would treat her. She was still thinking of this when her phone rang. It was Grace, sounding rather lethargic.
"Anne, your aunt asked us to have dinner at the Perez family's house tonight."
Dinner at the Perez family's house? Anne was taken aback. The Perez family was still willing to let her eat with them? Squeezing her phone and pursing her lips, her thoughts ran wild, and she didn't know how to feel. After half an hour of waiting, she arrived at the Perez family's house. Grace had also arrived and was sitting on the sofa, chatting with Elise.
Anne is here. Sit down.
Elise put her teacup down and smiled slightly. Everything seemed unchanged. Anne sat beside Grace, and the Perez family's servant brought her a cup of tea. Opposite, Elise shook her teacup. Then she lowered her eyebrows and smiled at Grace.
Grace, there's no such thing as overnight hatred between mother and daughter, as long as you build the bridge. How could Bessy not forgive you?
Anne's heart fell sharply at her words. She suddenly understood that she had been invited to the Perez family's house all because of Bessy. Her blood ran cold. Her fingernails dug into her palm. Thinking that she was only there thanks to Bessy, she felt an inexplicable sense of humiliation. Holding the teacup, Grace lowered her eyes, not knowing what to say. She seemed to be in a dilemma. How could she possibly not have realized that the Perez family had maintained this attitude towards her because of Bessy? Grandpa Perez came back in from discussing business outside. Seeing Grace, he greeted her very cordially.
Were you talking about Bessy? Speaking of her, you have given birth to a good daughter. As the national top scorer, she can enter the laboratory for sure. She might even enter it this year.
Laboratory? This was the first time Grace heard this, but she attempted to conceal her ignorance and only slightly raised her head. Having been in the Smith family for so many years, she had already learned how to hide things like that, and knew how to not be looked down upon by others. Boom! Tiffany kicked the door open on a phone call.
You must snatch it tomorrow. If you can't get Noah's tickets again, we'll have to wait another year.
Sitting on the sofa, Anne frowned deeply. She originally didn't want to hear anything about Bessy, but after hearing Tiffany's words, she suddenly remembered something. When she came to Evanston last year, Tiffany seemed to have said that the violin repertoire sounded very similar to Noah's. At the same time, James and Tucker arrived at the Heaven Lounge. This was the most secretive clubhouse in Evanston, and no paparazzi could get in. Zeke's national popularity was terrifying, and he had lots of obsessive fans as well. Only the Heaven Lounge in the entirety of Evanston could stop those paparazzi. The Heaven Lounge had a particularly famous story. A paparazzo had gotten in and took a few photos of third-rate celebrities, and then sold them to several newspapers and even circulated them on the internet. Episode 281. Do you want to meet your uncle? In less than a day, all the photos on the online newspapers disappeared. At the same time, the paparazzi's identity was also discovered by the Heaven Lounge. The paparazzi, as well as the several newspapers that had released the photos, were blacklisted in the city. It was then that everyone knew that the World Poker Tour covered the Heaven Lounge's back. No one in the upper social circle dared to cause trouble in the Heaven Lounge. Since James had never been to such a place before, he was a little unaccustomed to it and felt uncomfortable all over. On the contrary, Tucker looked much calmer than him. Zeke glanced over James and Tucker. He had even bought Tucker a gift from abroad. As luck would have it, it was a game console. Although he was 35 years old, age had never left a trace on Zeke's face. His facial features were just the right kind of beauty, a pair of beautiful eyes with a romantic and distinguished temperament lighting them from the inside. His eyelashes were extremely long and covered the edge of his eyes when they slightly hung down. His frame was slender and well-proportioned, and his whole body was like a fine carving. Over the course of the day, James had too much to drink. He raised a glass to Zeke.
In the past, someone scouted me to be a model, but I didn't go.
At this point, he was already a little drunk. In a good mood, Zeke glanced at Tucker gently.
Tucker, do you like my gift?
He had brought back the game console after hearing from Jack that Tucker liked playing games. Jack stood watching at the side, feeling very surprised. He didn't expect the usually unapproachable Zeke to like Tucker so much. Lowering his head and glancing at the game console, Tucker hesitated and then said, "I like it." Zeke smiled and reached out to ruffle his hair. Then he took Tucker and James back to the Park Place apartments. After the two were settled, Zeke walked back to the car with his hands behind his back.
Tucker said that he has a sister, but why aren't we picking her up together?
It was obvious from his tone that he really wanted to meet that sister.
The fourth son is like a tiger watching his prey. I don't even dare to bring James back to the old house.
Jack shook his head.
I was afraid of something going wrong. When I first found James, he hadn't even attended university.
Zeke's brows rose when he heard this. After a day of filming, he was already showing exhaustion in his face.
No matter what, she's still part of the Miller family, and also my niece. We have already found my brother, but I don't even know what his daughter looks like.
He took a handkerchief from his assistant and said lethargically,
Give me information on my brother's daughter. I'll find her.
Jack paused and then said,
Actually, Keith found out that Tucker's sister is studying in Evanston. I've done a little research.
Zeke raised his eyebrows and waited for further information. Jack bowed his head in shame.
But I found nothing.
Zeke was surprised. Although the Miller family was already in decline, they were still incomparable to ordinary families. Tucker's sister. How could they not find anything on her?
Do you think anything happened?
Zeke sat up straight and glanced at him.
Has my other brother shown any movement over this matter?
The fourth son was cruel and even united with the Flake family to devour the Miller family's properties. Over the years, Zeke had also found hints that James's disappearance in the past was inextricably linked to the fourth son's mother. Jack paused and realized the seriousness of this matter.
I'll get people to look into it again.
The next day, Bessy got up earlier than usual, at 6 in the morning. At the moment, she was sitting at the dining table finishing her meal. After reading all night and not sleeping well, she yawned sleepily. She looked up and saw Michael with her backpack. Leave it there, I have to go to school later. He raised the backpack and casually said,
I'll drop you on my way.
I'm going to school. Bessy followed him after finishing her milk.
I'm going to the medical laboratory. The campus is on the way.
Michael took the keys and leaned on the door, waiting for her to change shoes. Bessy followed him to the elevator after changing her shoes. Holding the flower pot, Marvin followed far behind them. Since Bessy was living in the school now, Marvin wanted to take the potted plant over. Early in the morning, not many people could be seen on the road. Michael drove the car to the school gate before stopping. He walked in front while Bessy followed 2 or 3 steps behind him. There was an avenue inside the school gate, and the sports field could be seen by walking a few steps past the gate. People were still running in the morning at this time. Michael looked down at the time on his wristwatch.
It's still early. Would you like to go to the medical laboratory?
He asked. It wasn't 7 o'clock yet. He also knew that Bessy had no class during the first period today. She only came to school at this time to read at the library. When he said that she could read at the Highline Apartments, she said it was too distracting. Uninterested, Bessy waved her hand. It smells of formaldehyde. I don't want to go. At the intersection along the path, she took her backpack from him and casually slung it behind her. Bye. She raised her hand without looking back. Marvin rushed to Michael with the flower pot.
That's strange. How did Miss Miller know that the medical laboratory smells of formaldehyde?
The library opened at 7 o'clock sharp. Bessy went in with her student card and found a seat before gathering up some books. As soon as she returned to her seat, a Twitter message popped up on her phone. Tucker had texted, and the tone of it was as if he was sharing a treasure with her.
Sister, do you want to meet our uncle?
Bessy put the books on the table, then picked up her phone. She answered very concisely. No. Tucker didn't reply right away. Picking up her pen and reading her book, it was a long time before Bessy received Tucker's reply. Tucker just sent one word. Oh. Raising an eyebrow, she put the phone aside and continued flipping slowly through the book. Most of the books on nuclear engineering were theoretical knowledge points, complicated and tedious. Whenever she encountered a particularly difficult problem, she would write it down and then ask the professor after class. The Science and Technology Department had assigned several laboratory professors this time to avoid this situation. After all, due to the lack of laboratory professors at the beginning of last year, Luke had shot all the lecturers down with his questions. After this was repeated a few times, all the professional teachers who taught Luke went crazy and jointly sent a letter to the dean. Once the dean knew about this, he ended up giving Luke the contact numbers of several laboratory professors. On the other end of the phone, Tucker put his textbooks into his school bag and weakly took the bag downstairs.
Tucker, are you feeling unwell?
Keith took the car keys and drove Tucker to school. He asked in concern after seeing his state. No, Tucker shook his head, then glanced down at his phone again before following Keith downstairs. Zeke's manager arrived at the Miller family's house early in the morning and was holding a contract.
Film God.
At the sight of Zeke, he showed him the contract in his hand.
This is the variety show you signed on for last time.
Zeke had been working very hard since his debut many years ago and had made a lot of money in the entertainment industry, but most of his funds had been given to Jack for temporary operation. He accepted both TV series and movies. This year, the fourth son's oppression of his family line had already come to light, but Jack only had 3 programmers left, so Zeke had taken on a large-scale reality show. With his status and it being his first time accepting a reality show, his appearance fee was sky high. In fact, Zeke's current qualifications in the entertainment industry weren't suitable for reality shows, and he should have concentrated on being in movies instead, but he had been in urgent need of money. No one had expected that after returning from filming a movie, Jack would use an intelligent system to get back the shares that had been swallowed by the fourth son. Because of this, the Miller family's roots had gradually recovered. Because of these shares, Jack wasn't short of money for the time being, but Zeke had already signed the contract and didn't intend to break it.
Put it on the table.
Zeke slowly picked up a sandwich.
Get ready, I'm taking Tucker out for dinner tonight.
The manager glanced at him in surprise.
It seems like you really like that kid. We hit it off.
Zeke finished eating and wiped his hands with a paper towel. Bringing a cup of warm coffee over to Zeke, Jack asked the manager what reality show it was and whether it was dangerous. The manager explained it to him. This reality show was the most popular one in America, with a total of over 1 million hits on every major platform on the internet. Jack naturally had watched the show and hesitated for a while.
I've watched this reality show before. It seems to be filmed with family members. Jack, our company has a lot of amateurs who aren't very popular. If the film god wants to film those parts, these companies will naturally arrange for people to play his family.
The manager understood his concerns and explained all of this with a smile. As part of the entertainment industry, outsiders thought that Zeke's family was a good starting point and he had it easy, but only a few people knew how difficult it was for him to develop his work in the early days under the fourth son's suppression. Episode 282. That's Noah's Arranger. Jack had also helped him deal with many things in the early stages and naturally knew the twists and turns of the entertainment industry. Hearing Zeke's words, he suddenly thought of something.
Why don't you use Tucker instead of those amateurs this time? It's better than having those amateurs rise to popularity after the show. Tucker is so good looking, much better than those amateurs. The audience will surely like him, and you can even bring him around with you openly.
Zeke was a little moved after hearing this. Seeing that he was really considering it, the manager was caught between laughter and tears.
Film god, Jack doesn't understand, but how could you consider this? The entertainment industry is a magnifying glass, and every move will be magnified. You know about cyberbullying and how it'll affect the development of children. Tucker is young, but he is also very well behaved and smart. How could he possibly behave badly and have people hate him?
Zeke stared disapprovingly at the manager. The manager shut up and spoke no more, afraid that Zeke would find Tucker on the spot if he rambled on. If he hadn't been Zeke's manager since he was 20, he would almost think that Tucker was his illegitimate child. When Bessy returned to her dormitory at noon after class was over, there was already a potted plant on the table. Kara turned sideways, took off her earphones, and pointed to the potted flower plant. The resident assistant brought it up when I came back. Glancing at it, Bessy saw that it was the one Marvin had brought along that morning. Kara had been playing games, but since all her cards were gone, she chatted with Bessy instead. "I didn't know you grew flowers." Bessy went to check her face in the bathroom. "I just water it, I don't grow it." This was her first time seeing Bessy after the holidays, and since they were alone in the bedroom, Kara whispered in inquiry, "Bessy, do you really want to study your second major and only take the first major's examinations? I heard that Northwestern University's midterm and final exams are very difficult, and it's very troublesome if you fail to meet the standards. I heard from the seniors that it's especially difficult this year." She sounded very worried. Denora's words last time obviously had an impact on her. "It's particularly difficult this year?" Bessy's focus wasn't on the same things as Kara's. Putting down the mouse, Kara rested her chin in her hand. "The counselor said that. He doesn't know the specific details either, but he just told me to be more attentive in class." "Oh." Bessy sat back down in her chair. Glancing at her, Kara remembered the timetable she had checked in the morning. "By the way, we're going out for lunch this afternoon. There's a delicious shop on the snack street." Bessy looked up and leaned against the back of the chair as she suddenly thought of something. "I might not be able to go." "You don't have class this afternoon. Don't lie to me." Kara immediately took out a photo of Bessy's nuclear engineering course schedule that she had copied down. "No, I have to meet a friend," said Bessy, casually propping up her legs. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Noah was in a room on the second floor inside a quiet afternoon clubhouse near Northwestern University.
Noah, if the boss knows that I took the liberty of taking you away from the commercial shooting scene without authorization, he will definitely beat me to death. The concert is nearing and your fans are everywhere in Evanston, let alone on the college campus.
The assistant pondered.
What friend are you meeting?
Noah took off his mask and the glasses on the bridge of his nose and put them aside. He didn't reply to his assistant. 2 knocks sounded on the door calmly. Noah stood up and walked towards the door. The assistant stared at him.
"Noah, don't open the door just like that if..."
Before he finished speaking, Noah had already opened the door. A young girl stood outside, wearing a peaked cap that covered her face. Noah turned sideways to let her in and then closed the door. As she walked in, she took off her black peaked cap and casually revealed her face. It was Bessy. Staring at her face, the assistant's eyes widened. She was so beautiful. She looked like a college student. Was she a student from the university town? To meet her, Noah had even pushed a commercial and came all the way to such a dangerous place like the university town. After all the reasoning, the assistant finally realized the truth. With trembling fingers, he didn't dare make a call in front of Noah. Afraid of looking at them and being silenced, he only dared take out his phone and send a message to someone labeled Boss Simon.
"Boss, Noah has a secret girlfriend."
Boss Simon just replied with one character, a question mark. Simon Osborne was Noah's manager, and he was also the company's leader. So the juniors and even some artists addressed him as Boss Simon. The assistant had only spent a short while in the entertainment industry, and his desire for gossip was ignited. He quietly informed Simon about the incident and described the secret girlfriend.
"Do you know what Noah is doing with the VIP floor tickets for his concert? He gave them all to her. When did Noah ever do such a thing? Boss Simon, why aren't you replying?"
After a long while, Boss Simon slowly replied,
"That's not Noah's girlfriend. That's Nico Soup, Noah's arranger. I'm going back to work. Look out for paparazzi."
Simon was still slowly drinking his tea. He typed slowly and sent a message. He even told the little assistant to entertain the great god arranger. The assistant held his phone in a daze. Like most people, he was Noah's fan. He was also familiar with Noah's history. From Noah's debut, it was his first single that shot him to popularity on the internet. Then, he had been scouted to participate in a draft selection. Ever since his debut, one name was bound to him. The god-level arranger that was a ghost in the industry, Nico Soup. Even Noah's fans had tried finding out about this Nico Soup. Countless musicians wanted to dig into this by bribing Noah's staff members. A paparazzi team had even followed Noah for 3 consecutive months, investigating the people around him, but still failing to find Nico Soup. The other party was too mysterious to dig up. Had Simon just said, "This incredibly good-looking and young girl was the god-level arranger Nico Soup," no wonder the paparazzi couldn't find anything. Even if she appeared in front of Noah openly, no one would guess that she was Nico Soup. The assistant stood there, his mind blank. Knock, knock. Another knock sounded outside, and then a waiter's voice was heard. The assistant immediately returned to his senses. Before Noah reacted, he opened the door a small slit, and then took the tray from the waiter. A few desserts and cakes were on it. The assistant respectfully handed Bessy the coffee before heading back to Noah's side. He was respectful, as if Bessy were his father.
Nico, are you very busy recently?
Noah stirred the coffee with a spoon and glanced at her, casually folding the tickets and stuffing them into her pocket. Bessy replied, "Somewhat." The assistant stared as Bessy nonchalantly folded the tickets.
No wonder.
Noah glanced faintly at her, then continued blankly,
"Do you remember the arrangement you owe me?"
Bessy just leaned back in her chair and rubbed her forehead. Military training had started since school reopened, and then she had to go to the training base. Noah's arrangement had kept being delayed. 2 more days, she replied, after thinking for a while with an aching head. Bessy wanted to go to the library. She only chatted for a while with Noah before leaving with her backpack. After she left, the assistant stared in her direction intently. Then he stammered and seemed to return to his senses.
Noah, just now, she's the great arranger Nico Soup?
He predicted that the entertainment industry would go crazy if they knew this. In the evening, when Michael came back from the medical laboratory, he saw Joshua sitting in the hall.
Dad?
Michael changed his shoes at the door and unhurriedly asked,
"What's the matter?"
Joshua looked behind him with a smile, as if looking for someone. Behind Michael, Marvin appeared with a wooden face. He hurriedly bowed when he saw Joshua and said, "Mr. Clark." At the sight of Marvin, Joshua's smile dropped. His usually imposing expression reappeared, and his eyelids drooped as he simply nodded emotionlessly. Marvin was speechless. Sitting down as usual on the sofa, Michael took the cup of coffee Marvin offered him and slowly took a sip. Then, he leaned back on the sofa with a tired expression. Joshua glanced at him.
"The White family is coming back from Austria. They have already achieved results from the developing market there,"
he said. Michael nodded.
"Oh, we have a family dinner this evening. Remember to come over."
Joshua suddenly felt suffocated by Michael and stood up. The Clark family held a family dinner every month. This time, it was mainly to have the White family over. If they really opened a market in Austria, this would have a great impact on the other families, and also change Evanston's layout. At the Clark family's banquet, the others arrived very early, while Rosemary and Michael came right on the dot. Marvin followed behind them. The 2 seats to the left of Joshua were reserved for them. Marvin respectfully stood behind Michael. At the sight of them, the other members of the Clark family frowned to themselves.
"Everyone's here. Let's eat first."
Joshua wore an expensive suit. He glanced at the people at the table, then picked up his fork.
"Aaron should know best about the White family's affairs. He checked with Miss Blake last time."
The Clark family's hallmaster said. The others nodded.
"That's right."
Everyone was discussing Aaron. Sitting beside Michael, Rosemary wasn't concerned about Aaron's matters. She picked up a piece of vegetable and whispered, "Bessy still didn't come back with you?" Michael just picked up his fork, calmly lowered his head and replied with a smile,
"Has your company made up for the shortcomings today?"
Gritting her teeth, Rosemary still laughed along and put a piece of meat into Michael's bowl. "Come, brother, eat this. It's your favorite." They conversed amongst themselves. Episode 283. Information about Tucker's sister. Opposite them, Aaron couldn't help but sneer.
"Brother, I heard that you have a girlfriend now. Why didn't you bring her for us to see? Speaking of which, sister, you've also been hanging out with our brother and his girlfriend recently. You've even forgotten about the cooperation with the World Poker Tour. I wonder how it is."
Aaron had always been at odds with the other 2 siblings. Joshua glanced at him with an aching head.
"Enough!
Joshua obviously favored Rosemary, but this didn't bother Aaron. He picked up his wine glass and took a sip. Standing behind Michael, Marvin looked up expressionlessly.
Don't you know?
Aaron glanced up at him, surprised that he had spoken up. Like Michael, Marvin was almost invisible in the Clark family.
What? Rosemary has already signed an agreement with the World Poker Tour yesterday. She's the first of the 4 major families to cooperate with the World Poker Tour.
Marvin sounded a little simple-minded, but his words were like thunder to the people at the table. Hearing this, even the usually calm Joshua couldn't help being surprised.
Rosemary, is that true?
Putting down her fork, Rosemary lightly replied, I just signed the agreement. I wanted the forces to stabilize before telling you. Aaron's smile froze. The big families in Evanston eyed the World Poker Tour covetously, and no one dared to move recklessly. Aaron had also contacted the World Poker Tour before, but he had received no response. Hadn't Rosemary encountered some problems in her company recently? How did she successfully sign a contract with the World Poker Tour? How did she do it? Aaron no longer had the mood to listen to her conversation with the others. His head was about to explode and he couldn't think of how Rosemary managed to sign the contract. While he was lost in thought, Rosemary also glanced thoughtfully at Marvin. She found a chance to lean back to him, smiling with raised eyebrows. Marvin, how did you know I signed the agreement? She didn't believe Bessy would have told him. Marvin lowered his head. He paused, and then said, I guessed. Zeke parked the car by the school's gate. Since it wasn't convenient for him to get out, he sent Tucker a message with his location. Then he turned on his Bluetooth headset. A hoarse female voice said, Mr. Miller, we found a piece of information. Putting his hands on the steering wheel, he noticed Tucker coming out of the school gate. His brows slightly relaxed, and he politely said, I'll let the finance department call you for the deposition later. Please send the information to my mailbox. The voice on the other end was still very hoarse. Okay. Hanging up, he took off the headset and looked out. Tucker glanced at the opposite side of the road. Having received Zeke's message, he knew the license plate number, the car's color, and where Zeke had parked, so he saw the car at a glance. Then he walked to Zeke's car with his backpack and opened the door for the passenger seat. Instead of taking him to the hotel, Zeke took him back to his apartment. The apartment building he lived in was home to many entertainers and was extremely private. Zeke had nothing to hide and took Tucker right in.
Welcome. I've already told your father that you're staying with me tonight.
Zeke gave him a pair of slippers at the entrance. He took 2 steps forward and continued.
This is your room. There are computers and game consoles inside. You can play first while I cook.
He heard from Jack that this child was a little antisocial and liked to play games. Hence, he had spent the day getting people to organize the room and had bought a lot of hard-to-find game consoles. He went to the kitchen to turn down the gas for the soup and to marinate the chicken wings. Tucker left the door to the room open, and when Zeke glanced inside, he saw him playing a game with his headphones and a mouse. Beside him, the game discs were stacked up. Grinning, he suddenly thought of something while watching Tucker. He returned to his own room, turned on the computer, and logged into his email. There was the information on Tucker's sister that he had asked someone to check today. Having been in the entertainment industry for so many years, Zeke had his own film studio and connections. Since Jack hadn't been able to find out about Bessy, he'd had to check the matter out himself. The soup in the kitchen was still boiling as he clicked on the top email. The attached file was about 100 kilobytes. He downloaded it and glanced roughly at it. He had a good memory and hardly spent any effort memorizing lines during filming. Although this document was very long, he could read 10 lines at a time and finished it in less than 10 minutes. A few photos were attached at the bottom. Zeke couldn't help but frown. Worry flooded his heart. After meeting Tucker, he'd had great expectations for his 2 sisters, but he hadn't expected to receive such content. When someone knocked on the door outside, he finally released the mouse he had been gripping tightly.
Come in. Zeke, how long has your soup been simmering?
His manager came in wearing an apron.
I stewed it in the afternoon. Turn off the heat after another 20 minutes.
Zeke opened the drawer and took out a cigarette. Surprised, the manager stared at him.
What happened? Did someone put you in a bind, or did something bad happen on the fourth son side?
Neither. I found some information. Zeke turned the laptop sideways and turned to the manager.
Take a look.
The manager pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. His eyes narrowed.
Anne?
He read slower than Zeke, but was also frowning by halfway through the document.
No, Zeke, listen to me. We can't acknowledge this person.
This document was surprisingly Anne's data. The flyleaf of each page had a 129 mark. The manager had known Zeke for many years and naturally knew his social connections. If it was 129, it was certainly real. The information was very detailed, including stuff like how Anne never saw James after going to the Smith family's house and how she avoided other people at school every time. Some information about Grace was also included.
I know.
Zeke flicked the soot.
Tucker seems to like her very much.
Without Tucker, even if the Miller family took Anne back with great fanfare, Zeke wouldn't even spare her a glance.
That's not the way.
The manager sighed.
Once we acknowledge this Anne, havoc will ensue. I'll ask Tucker about it later.
Zeke smiled faintly and snuffed out the cigarette butt. He couldn't believe Tucker liked Anne so much, and he remembered Jack saying that there were 2 daughters. He had also asked Tucker in the car today. At the mention of his sister, Tucker had shut up and gone back to playing his game console without a word. Back at Northwestern University, Bessy had returned to the female dormitory. Instead of going to the library that night, she took a shower, then sat down with a stack of blank papers. She wrote a line of notes on the paper. Noah's music style was changeable. Last year, it was mainly an ethnic lyrical style, but this year, it was rock and roll. It was a big breakthrough, but Bessy failed to receive inspiration and just crushed one paper after the other. Kara sat on the table beside her and was about to ask her to join a game. Seeing Bessy drawing notes on the paper, she couldn't help but ask, "Bessy, you've studied music before?" In her earphones, the boys in her class asked,
Kara, what's up? Is Bessy playing?
Bessy ignored her question, so Kara looked away and said quietly, "Nope." The boys in their class were taken aback.
Is she still reading?
No, Kara chose her card. You might not believe it, but she's writing down musical notes. Bessy wrote for a while and still found it unsatisfactory. Putting the pen down, she received a Twitter video call at that moment. It was Clarissa. She thought about it before taking her earphones to the balcony and picking them up.
I took an order today.
In the video, Clarissa took a can of beer from the refrigerator, walked to the sofa, and opened it with one hand. Leaning on the balcony, Bessy put on the earphones and raised an eyebrow. Is it related to me?
Almost,
Clarissa said.
It's mainly to check on your father James's children.
I only realized the connection to you after checking, so I erased your information and only left Anne's. Clarissa had never investigated Bessy's general information. She had only found out that she was Anne's older sister after doing this order today. Bessy guessed who had placed the order after hearing this. Half sitting on the balcony, she bit into the leaf she had picked from the flower and said rather indifferently, "Go on."
The person who placed the order is Zeke Miller.
Clarissa sat down on the sofa and took a sip of beer.
He helped me once when I was a paparazzi and is part of the Miller family. Do you want me and the boss to help you solve this trouble?
No need. Smiling, Bessy reached out and climbed over the balcony railing, before dropping to the ground. She spat out the leaf from her mouth, her eyebrows drawn and her eyes full of a bright and evil glint, even in the dim lights. I'll do it myself. Understood. Clarissa wasn't concerned. Crushing the beer can, she casually threw it and it flew directly into the trash can with a bang. I'm hanging up. The next day, Bessy received a call from Tucker early in the morning. What's the matter? Bessy was headed to the library with her backpack on. On the other end of the line, Tucker was sitting on the toilet seat. He whispered,
Bessy, can I participate in a variety show with our uncle? He said it's very fun.
Bessy understood that this uncle would be Zeke, the one Clarissa had talked about last night. This was the first time Tucker had shown such obvious affection for someone. Fun? Bessy entered the library and walked over to the last row of tables by the window. She threw her backpack onto the table, leaned against a chair, and started fiddling with the earphone cable. Episode 284. The Fated Meeting. "I'm not sure, so I'm asking you," Tucker whispered. Bessy unzipped her bag and took out a textbook as well as a notebook. "What about Dad? You can discuss it with him." "I can't ask him." Tucker glanced at the closed door and lowered his voice further. "He's too gullible." In short, Tucker didn't trust James's judgment. Smiling, Bessy seemed to be in a good mood. "You're right. How about this? Do you and our uncle have time tonight?" Tucker was shocked. "Bessy?" "I want to talk about the variety show with him." Bessy glanced at the students coming in, one after another. "I'll hang up first." On the other end of the line, Tucker stared at his phone in disbelief. After a long while, he sent a message. "Bessy, are you going to meet our uncle?" In the library, Bessy went to the bookshelf and found 2 books. When she saw Tucker's message, she replied, her expression distasteful. "Yes." Bessy's schedule was packed that day, and she had her last lesson at 5:30 p.m. Not many people were outside the school at this time. She didn't return to her bedroom to change her clothes. Walking outside with her backpack, she easily grabbed a taxi at the school gate. She checked the address sent by Tucker and gave it to the taxi driver. They finally stopped outside a quiet restaurant. Not far away, Michael and Patrick were walking down the street. Patrick was talking to someone on the phone when he noticed that Michael had stopped in his tracks, as if he had seen something strange. "Michael?" He also paused and glanced in the same direction, but saw nothing. Taking out a cigarette, Michael snorted softly, and his eyebrows drooped expressionlessly. "It's nothing. Let's go." Patrick nodded and continued reporting his work over the phone. Absent-mindedly, Michael bit his cigarette but didn't light it. He took out his phone and unlocked it with his bony fingers. After a long while, he sent a message. "What are you doing?" Upstairs inside the restaurant, Tucker was playing games with headphones on. He was with Zeke and his manager in a private room. After finding out who he was meeting tonight, the manager lowered his voice and said, "Zeke, you're too impulsive. This Anne is obviously scheming. If she knows that you're her uncle, she'll definitely try to take advantage of you." This wouldn't have any substantial impact on Zeke, but it would certainly be disgusting. The manager had read through the information given to Zeke last night. Many people like Anne existed in the entertainment industry. James had been working in hard labor and had never witnessed what Anne did. She was living in the Smith family's house as if she had forgotten her father's existence. Of course, such people were very common in reality. Her mother, for example, seemed similar. "It's going to be big trouble if she really wants to enter the entertainment industry at this time." The manager sighed. Zeke's spotless history might now be stained by Anne from now on. Zeke poured a glass of wine for the manager, his demeanor gentle and elegant. "Don't jump to conclusions. It might be better than you imagine." He glanced at Tucker and pondered the possibilities. The manager cautiously glanced at him, then nodded and stopped trying to persuade him. "Then you have to prepare to be used." He also needed to prepare for future PR content. At this time, Tucker took off his headphones and stood up. "My sister is here." Zeke and his manager turned to look at Tucker. "Where is she?" Zeke stood up and looked down. Putting the earphones away, Tucker looked out the door with shining eyes. "Downstairs." It was obvious he liked this sister very much. "No hurry." Zeke chuckled. "She'll arrive soon." The manager glanced at the door and frowned. Having only Anne's information, he had a headache and felt worried after hearing Tucker say that his sister was coming. 3 knocks sounded on the door. At this moment, it was too late to persuade Zeke. The manager dragged his feet to open the door. The manager had followed Zeke for many years, even witnessing him opening his own studio and beginning to sign new artists. As a manager, he was on the constant lookout for potential newcomers. At first glance, he always looked at the person's appearance, temperament, and unique characteristics. From Anne's photo last night, she had the style of a pretty daughter of a humble family. Her appearance would be considered adequate in the entertainment industry, but it was still a little lacking compared to Zeke. The entertainment industry had no shortage of beauties. Putting Anne's face in the entertainment industry wouldn't even make a splash. Knowing this, as well as her attitude, the manager opened the door with complicated feelings.
Zeke.
He looked up and was about to speak, but when he saw Bessy's face, he swallowed his words back inside. Instead of Anne standing at the door, it was a tall girl with long hair casually draped over her shoulders. Her skin was snow white and her eyes were downcast. When she heard him, she slightly raised an eyebrow, her thin lips casually curling. She exuded an inexplicable sense of evil tendencies. The manager stared at Bessy with eyes that had seen many beauties. Perhaps because the difference from Anne was so great, he didn't dare connect the person in front of him with Tucker's sister. He just uttered blankly,
Who are you looking for?
Glancing at the message she had just received on her phone, she raised an eyebrow and replied after a while, I'm Bessy. I'm looking for Tucker. Her reply was extremely concise and clear.
Oh, come in, please.
The manager hurriedly turned sideways and stepped aside, but he was still stunned inside. Wasn't it Anne who was supposed to come? Who was Bessy?
Bessy.
Tucker stood up and was about to pull on her sleeves. Bessy glanced at him. Sit down. Tucker immediately retracted his hand and sat back down. Then he introduced Zeke to her.
Bessy, this is our uncle.
Then he turned his head and said with his chin slightly raised,
Uncle, this is my sister, Bessy.
Zeke had felt some suspicions after receiving the information last night, but although he had already suspected it, he was still very surprised to see Bessy in person. From Tucker's tone, he could detect his affection for her. Glancing at him, he chuckled softly.
Yes, I'm Zeke Miller, your uncle. He told me that you're here to discuss his appearance in the district's reality show.
Bessy sat down and first sent a message to Michael. She nodded absent-mindedly. Tucker couldn't decipher her attitude, but at least she didn't leave straight away. He just bowed his head and took a sip of his drink. Zeke had only just decided to bring Tucker to the variety show, so naturally, no contract had been signed yet. But there was an electronic version of it, which he asked his manager to show Bessy. Taking out his phone, the manager found the contract and showed it to her. She took it and looked through the document. The contract was 12 pages in total. She scrolled for a little more than a minute and then returned the phone to the manager.
You're done?
The manager was shocked. Yeah. Between a glass of juice and a glass of boiled water, she picked up the latter and tapped on the glass with her hand. Desolate island? Isn't it dangerous? Zeke squinted slightly and thought for a while.
They only say it's possible. The show will be broadcasted for 3 episodes, and only 1 episode will be on the deserted island. We'll basically experience life in scenic areas, but there'll be doctors and helicopters on standby.
Bessy rested her hand on her chin and asked several more questions. They were all about issues mentioned in the contract. While listening, the manager felt increasingly puzzled. After checking on his phone, sure enough, he found all the things that had prompted Bessy's questions in the contract. He looked up at her very surprised. He thought she had casually flipped through it, but he didn't expect her to have looked through it so seriously.
The program group has many challenges. Tucker is smart. I can bask in his light by bringing him along.
Zeke reached out to pour more juice into Tucker's cup. Bessy hadn't actually come to check the contract. Several celebrities would be on the variety show, so they wouldn't dare to put the guests in danger. She mainly wanted to test Zeke and found that he indeed planned to look out for Tucker. He was much more reliable than James. After gaining this understanding, Bessy stopped talking.
Bessy,
Tucker had already finished his meal. Seeing Bessy put down her fork, he wanted her to look at his game. Bessy didn't even lift her head. No, I don't know how to do it. Tucker looked down and stammered miserably.
Oh.
The manager on the side hurriedly said,
Tucker, what game is it? Let me help you.
Tucker handed the phone to him. The game had progressed halfway through. Not taking children's games seriously, the manager clicked on the start button. After a few seconds, pop! His game character died. Startled, he started again. Pop! His game character died again. After repeating this several times, he silently handed the phone back to Tucker. Tucker took it expectantly. Having finished her meal, Bessy glanced at the time and was about to head back. Zeke also put down his fork and went downstairs with her.
Where do you live? We'll drive you back.
It was past 7 o'clock now, nearing 8 o'clock. Zeke didn't know what Bessy did or where she lived. He only heard Jack mention that she was a student studying at the local university. At this time of day, he naturally wouldn't let her go back alone. No need. Bessy stood at the intersection and glanced around. She spotted a black car not far away. Someone is waiting for me. She put her phone in her pocket and walked diagonally across the road. She waved back to him as she went. Zeke stood there, watching Bessy get into the car. Only after the car drove away did he look away. The manager beside him took a glance at the license plate number, wanting to write it down in case Bessy met with any danger. But while reading it, he felt something strange. This license plate number, wasn't it too arrogant? Episode 285. This sister isn't like the other sister. Zeke called James again. Tucker was still staying with him tonight. After returning home, the manager dared to ask,
Zeke, what's the deal with this Bessy? My brother has 2 daughters,
Zeke replied. He took a cup and poured a glass of lemonade. Clearing his throat, he leaned on the water dispenser and laughed.
I only checked on Anne, but Tucker wasn't talking about her.
In the car with the arrogant license plate, Bessy sat in the back seat while Patrick drove in front. Resting her cheek in one hand and putting her elbow on the window, she glanced at Patrick. Why is it you? Where's Marvin? Patrick glanced at the rearview mirror and respectfully replied,
I came out today to discuss business with Michael, so we picked you up. Marvin went to visit Mary.
Bessy counted the days. Marvin was probably meeting Mary about the flower. She tapped on the car window and turned to look at Michael. When did he go? I have something to tell Mary.
He just left.
Michael finally opened his eyes and glanced at her, his tone light.
It's not too late to go now.
Understanding his meaning, Patrick turned on his phone and Bluetooth at the red light. He dialed Marvin's phone and asked for the address. Marvin replied with an address a ways away from Northwestern University. It took more than an hour to drive there. Not many people were on the road at this moment, and it wasn't the holiday either, so the road wasn't very congested. They stopped at the intersection Marvin had sent them. Marvin had just arrived. Not many pedestrians were out and about.
Miss Miller, Michael.
Marvin greeted them as he saw them coming out from the back door of the car. Patrick glanced around and didn't see anyone else.
Has Mary come yet? She's arriving now.
Marvin glanced in one direction. This was where he traded with Mary every time. In less than 2 minutes, a van slowly drove towards the side of the road and then stopped. Mary got out of the car holding a flower pot. After handing it to Marvin, she ran to Bessy and whispered, Bessy, why didn't you tell me you were coming? Before Bessy could reply, Mary clapped a hand to her forehead. By the way, our cat, Mimi, is here too. Folding her arms, Bessy raised her chin. Let me see. Mary opened the door of the back seat. Mary's father took out the car key and got out of the driver's seat. He couldn't help but exhort.
Mary, be careful. So many people are here. Don't scare them.
At the thought of the very miserable cat in Mary's house, Marvin sympathetically glanced over. Mary was holding a black rope in her hand. Looking from Bessy's side, Marvin could see that the rope was a bit thick with a cold metallic luster. While standing next to Bessy, he stared at the rope in surprise.
Such a thick rope?
Was this necessary for a cat? Mimi, come down! Mary whistled, and a huge figure suddenly jumped out of the back seat. Both sensing the danger, Marvin and Patrick instinctively took a step back. Squinting, Michael reached out to grab Bessy and pull her to his side. As if sensing Michael's gaze, Mimi didn't dare to pounce forward. Mimi, sit down, Mary ordered. The black shadow prowling at the end of the rope stopped, and then sat in front of Mary imposingly.
This is Mimi?
Marvin stared at Mary and Mimi blankly. Patting Mimi's head, Mary smiled happily. Yeah, what's wrong? Marvin was speechless. No, it was fine to joke that your dog was a cat, but why did they give a nearly 3-foot-tall Tibetan Mastiff the name Mimi? Even sitting next to Mary, the Tibetan Mastiff was nearly 3 feet tall, with a pure black mane on its body that faintly reflected the cold light. His bark was dull, his head resembled a lion, and his bright, expressive eyes were slightly tinged with gold. The fine hair on his powerful claws danced about in the wind in a flurry. He was fierce and menacing. People passing by desperately wanted to be at least a kilometer away from him. "Bessy, what do you think of Mimi?" Mary was eager to know Bessy's opinion. Bessy touched her chin and nodded slowly. "He's fine. You raised him pretty well." While talking, she took out a casually folded ticket from her pocket and stuffed it directly into Mary's pocket. "What's this?" She took it out from her pocket. Her head aching, Bessy waved her away. "Bye." Returning to his senses, Patrick glanced at Marvin and whispered,
Are all of Miss Miller's friends like this?
Marvin took the flower pot handed over by Mary's father. Hearing this, he glanced at Patrick silently.
Brother, don't you remember the mercenary suddenly barbecuing obediently in the middle of a fight?
Marvin patted Patrick on the shoulder, then carefully carried the flower pot to the car trunk. Bessy returned to the car after talking to Mary and the others.
Miss Miller, where are you going?
Patrick sat in the driver's seat and turned the car on. Looking down at the time on her phone, she saw that it was already past 9 o'clock. Back to the Highline Apartments. Although there were regulations for returning to the dormitory, Dean Soup was very lenient towards Bessy. Sitting beside her with his lips slightly pursed, Michael silently turned towards her. He held his phone in one hand and his head in the other, looking a little distracted. His phone showed a conversation. "What are you doing?" "Meeting someone." It didn't matter if that was the case. Michael scrolled down the conversation and saw Bessy's second, later reply. "He looks more handsome in person." Appearance was power. After thinking for a while, Michael took out a cigarette from his pocket. Instead of lighting it, he just pinched it between his teeth. They arrived at the Highline Apartments. Patrick stopped the car at the gate. Michael and Bessy got out of the car while Patrick drove the car into the underground parking lot. Bessy lowered her head and followed unhurriedly behind Michael. She was still thinking of the Miller family. Michael pressed the elevator button. It needed time to come down from the 21st floor, so he glanced sideways at her and cleared his throat.
Who is it?
Unable to comprehend his question, Bessy leaned against the wall. What?
That...
Michael glanced at her and lazily said,
The person you said was handsome.
The elevator arrived with a ding. As the two of them entered it, Bessy casually replied, Zeke, the superstar. Zeke? Michael repeated the name once and suddenly remembered something. Looking down at her, his eyes narrowed and he suddenly chuckled lowly after a while. Once inside the elevator, he kept thinking about it. Zeke. Without checking, Michael had guessed from James's recent words that he was probably the Miller family's lost child from years ago. Bessy was unaware of the undulation in Michael's mood. She just took out her phone and opened a game. She turned on the screen recording function, but before she could play the game Tucker had sent her through the hidden software, a phone call suddenly appeared at the top of her screen. It was Principal White, whom she hadn't talked to for more than a year. Ding! The elevator door opened. While walking out, she picked up the call. Michael followed behind her, with her black backpack. Principal White had just got on the plane in Austria. Wearing reading glasses, his eyes looked extremely sharp behind the lenses. When the phone was connected, he smiled and glanced at Austria's landscape out the window.
Bessy, I'll arrive in Evanston tomorrow,
he said gently. At the same time, at Zeke's house, Jack was giving Zeke a copy of some information, his expression slightly strange.
Zeke, I found James's daughter.
Previously, he had no intention of finding the two daughters after retrieving James, but he had started the investigation after being prompted by Zeke. Zeke took the document in surprise. Jack showed him the information and couldn't help but exclaim,
His daughter is at Northwestern University, attending the art department. It turned out to be much better than I thought.
Jack had printed the information out, which wasn't particularly detailed and only filled one piece of paper. It showed Anne's photo and a general introduction to her current situation. It wasn't as detailed as Zeke's. Glancing at it casually, Zeke threw Jack's information on the table, then leaned against the sofa, his expression unclear. He was thinking about Bessy. As for Anne, after reading 129's information, he didn't really fancy her. But Bessy? although she didn't talk much. And he didn't know what she did since there wasn't much information on her. He still felt inexplicably close to her. Maybe it was because Tucker liked this sister very much.
Zeke, what do you think?
Jack couldn't figure out what Zeke thought, and subconsciously lowered his voice.
Should I send someone to pick her up?
Jack's information network wasn't as powerful as Zeke's. For many years, most of the Miller family's power had been swallowed up by the fourth son and the Flake family. Jack could only find out a little about Anne in such a short time. Tucker's door opened and he came in to get some water while wearing small slippers.
Temporarily set this matter aside.
Standing up, Zeke stopped talking about Anne and walked over to Tucker to help him get a glass of warm water.
Have you taken care of the headquarters? I heard you snatched a project.
He asked Jack.
I couldn't find out who edited the project. I asked Keith to take a look at the surveillance footage, and he's still looking at the 3 days footage.
Speaking of this, Jack frowned. When Tucker took the water that Zeke handed him and heard this, his eyebrows flashed.
Thank you,
he whispered to Zeke and then entered his room. Zeke had installed a huge screen for him. It was a screen that projected the game he was playing. Instead of taking his mouse immediately, he picked up his laptop from the bed. After opening the editor, he entered a line of code and then pressed enter. A firewall popped up. Putting his chin on his hand, he placed the laptop on his lap and stared at the editor page in confusion. After a long while, he sighed. He put the computer aside and slowly went to get his cell phone from where he'd thrown it on the bed. He clicked on Twitter, found Bessy's profile, and sent a message. Jack is watching the elevator surveillance for the 3 days of Thanksgiving break.